Now, this is from the Cyberpunk manual, a board game which came out in 1988. It had hot women on the cover, much to the astonishment and dismay of progressives who don't understand, like, how did it sell? But anyway, right, you got like this part here called diversity and unity. And this is what is very interesting. It says that it is now accepted among historical scholars that in the decades before the collapse, America suffered from the sickness of racismus and cultural identity. Everyone wanted to be seen as special. Every group had to be equal to or preferably better than its neighbors and fought to protect its special rights. If anyone had something that someone else wanted, they were painted as racist, sexist, elitist, or worse. The divisive me first attitude eventually tore the fabric of American culture apart and caused it to self destruct in a fireball of competing ideologies, none of which truly recognized as others' validity. Diversity led to anarchy. So the question is, like, how did they foresee the future? I mean, this was written in 1988. And to answer that, you have to go a little bit of digging through history. And if you look at the Soviet Union, once it collapsed, the KGB released its archives. And you see that they had a thing called active measures. And the active measures were trying to subvert American society. They realized that the different races within America are its weak point. So, like, trying to push for identity politics is going to have people at each other's throats, so they are not going to be united in order to make America great. So, the Soviet Union did push a lot of this woke ideology at the time. It was different than the woke ideology we have today, but it was similar enough that, as you can see in a 1988 manual, it writes it in a way that it's talking about modern day politics. So yeah, like the Soviet Union, one of the things that they did was to change definitions. Again, they would work through journalists, academics, students, opinion influencers, movie producers. Like that's how they were influencing the American mindset. And Yuri Bezmenov talks about this at length. But suffice to say that there was a there was a wave of woke ideology which came in America in the 80s. It had different names. For instance, sensitivity training. Like maybe a lot of you were familiar with that. You know, I'm using woke because everyone knows what the fuck I'm talking about. If you say cultural Marxist, that's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, so you're not allowed to call it that. If you say social justice, like, what's wrong with justice? You know, it's like, they don't want you to have a name for it, but, like, when you see it, you know what they're talking about. Like, when you see someone talk about cisgender heteronormative, like, you know what team they're on. You know that, right? So, it's not just, this particular manual that got it so right. It's not just the Cyberpunk manual, but you get to see movies like Demolition Man. You get to see RoboCop 2, especially with the HR lady that messes with RoboCop's ability to do police work. You get to see the plot in RoboCop 1, where the corporations are trying to increase the level of crime in order to... Sorry, I think that's RoboCop 3, yeah. Like, they're trying to increase the level of crime so people sell out the property and then the corporation buy them cheaper. Like, the reason you see these things isn't that they managed to predict the future. It's just like this ideology existed then. And the question is, like, why didn't it catch on? Well, number one is the fall of the Soviet Union, right? Like, they stopped financing it. But also number two is the lack of social media, right? So, like, this ideology is very difficult to use in order to try to persuade someone of it, right? Like, it's very difficult to try to persuade someone that, hey, your nation state is evil. You as a person, you're inherently evil because of your ancestors and what they did. So now you have to give money to other people. You know, like, it's very difficult to actually rationalize to someone about, like, microaggressions. Like, hey, you're not allowed to wear dreads and stuff. If you have, like, a beautiful woman on the cover of a video game that is inherently and deeply problematic, right? You can't really convince people of this. But what you can do is you can force people. So, like, a boss at a company can force its employees to believe in this shit, and they don't really believe it, but they pretend they do in order to keep their jobs. And with social media, you have like the same thing. Like you have the algorithms banning people who disagree. You have promoting people who agree. You have like suppressing any criticism of this ideology. And of course, you know, with BlackRock and with the ESG investment, it's like if you're a company that makes video games, well, you have to pretend that you're for this ideology in order to get cheap loans. So you start virtue signaling, you advertise, and you say, oh, yes, like all of our characters happen to be gay, and we really celebrate Black History Month, and we're good allies, and right? Like, companies have to say this in order to show that they are progressive. But the thing is, like, when most companies do this, they're creating the illusion that absolutely everyone believes in this, and that everyone is on board. So, like, if you disagree, you're just an atomized individual. Or if Hills versus Babyface makes fun of pronouns, then he is the problem. And you can notice like how fast all of this advances. Like 2 years ago, with Games Done Quick, they had like their pronouns stated in front, and everyone in the comment section was making fun of them. And now the same people were making fun of Hill versus Babyface, because again, like the process is called normalization, right? Like the new normal. Creating the illusion that everyone is on board, that this is like, there is no such thing as wokeness, it's just like normality, and anything that deviates from normality is far right, it's evil, it's bigoted, and if you happen to be that, well, you're probably insane or something, you know, you're an atomized individual that, you have your own thoughts, but like no one else agrees with you. This is why the comment sections have disabilities everywhere, because like they don't want people to be talking with each other. Because the moment people talk to each other, it's like, hey, you know, you agree with this thing? Yeah, I agree with... Like this is what Kevin Sorbo, the actor who played Hercules, talks about. Like, he was in Hollywood, and he was talking with another guy. Like, everyone around him was a leftist, right? And he talks with this guy who was also a leftist, and is basically saying a couple of right-wing ideas that the other guy resonates with. And it's like, oh, so you're like, you agree with this? And he's like, yeah, well, why don't you speak out? Well, if I speak out, I get fired. Tim Pool talked about the same thing about Portland. Like, you would go in Portland and there were a lot of businesses that had, like, Marxist slogans on the window. And Tim Pool happened to have a friend which owned the restaurant. He goes around and talks to him. It's like, you know, why do you have that thing outside? Because I know you're a right-winger. Like, I know you don't believe in it. And it's like, yeah, but if I don't put it, they break down my store. So it creates, like, the illusion that everyone is on board, right? And social media helps establish that. This is why in the 80s, like, this thing didn't catch on as much as it caught on today. There is a limit to it, though, because, again, it goes against human nature. It's, if you can't convince people and you just use the boot in order to suppress them, eventually the people rise up. You're not going to, like, the thing is, like, wokeness, I think it doesn't go away because the tactics are there, right? Like, trying to get people fired, banning them from social media, like, all that stuff is there. But what it does differ is, like, the type of ideology that's the flavor of the month. Like if you guys remember, when wokeness first started in 2016, you couldn't say anything negative about Islam, right? Like, there was a British person pointed out Islam is questionable, immediately got in trouble with the law, got arrested, right? Now you can. I mean, Macron, the president of France, was saying stuff that I was listening to, you know, how Islamofascism is destroying the republic. And I was like, if I were to say that on YouTube in 2018, I would get in trouble. So, yeah, I mean, you had basically Islam, and then it was with feminism, and then it was with, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement. Now it's with transgenders. So, like, it just, like, moves, it hops from thing to thing. Eventually it may even hop to something right-wing, I don't know, but, like, the culture is here to stay, I think, right? So unlike the 80s when it went away, I think we're going to live under the tyranny of the social media where there are certain opinions and ideas that are suppressed. I think, like, you can sum them up as populism, right? It's not right-wing versus left-wing, it's populism. If you're a populist, you're gonna get suppressed. And they're using the ideology that didn't work back in the 80s in order to do it. Let me know what you guys think, though. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.